New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.
Free my mind, open my heart with the whispers of truth, to live a conscious life, to live a conscious life on the growing edge, on the growing edge.
And now, here's Ali.
Hello and welcome to Growing Edge Live. I'm Ali Benjamin, your host. And if you're here for the first time, welcome. I'm so glad that you found us. You're in for a real treat today with my guest. And if you're here back because you love meeting all the interesting people that we have on Growing Edge Live here at New Thought Media Network, I'm so glad that you continue to show up. Today, I have an amazing friend of mine. We actually know each other. We live in the same state some of the time. And she's an amazing author. She's written many, many books. Her name is Christiane Turner. And I met Christiane at the Salt Lake Center for Spiritual Living in Salt Lake City some years ago. There she is, for those of you that are watching. And Christiane, it's so good to have you on the show. I know we've been wanting to have you come and share the great work that you do. And finally, we've made it happen. So thank you for being here.
Here we are. We made it. Good morning to you, Ali.
So where are you?
I am actually in Utah right now for another 3 weeks before traveling back to Europe, where my parents live. And so it's been a wonderful winter here with my family in Utah. I'm in southern Utah, very close to Zion National Park.
Beautiful, lovely place to go hiking.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I'm in a different location. Some of my guests might see the background and wonder where I am. I am in Incline Village near Lake Tahoe and staying with my sister and family and here visiting my mother. And so I'm going to be on the road for the next couple of months. And so my background will probably be changing every week. Anyway, so let's dive into you. I'd love to get to know you a little better and know about your upbringing. Obviously, you have a German accent, so you're not from America, neither am I. Where did you grow up and what was your early life like?
Well, I spent the first 24 years of my life in Germany, born and raised in a very small village close to Frankfurt, which is essentially in the center in the hill country of Germany. And I was surrounded by vineyards, rivers, castles, old cathedrals. And it's interesting how as a child, I didn't really appreciate it. We would complain when our parents would take us to Austria and Switzerland and Bavaria, and we had to walk around in the Alps. And the older I get and the more I visit, the more I appreciate my upbringing and the incredibly deep cultural roots that I grew up with. Because as we found out when we did some genealogy, our family name actually goes back over 500 years. In our church books, my father did some very extensive research into our family history. And that is something that I now really own and I'm proud of and I'm grateful for in living in America and being able to give that to my children and my grandchildren. Yeah.
So you came to the States when you were 24 or around that time?
Yeah.
Yeah. So in your early life, were you part of a religious organization? Were you spiritual? What was that like?
Growing up in the 60s in Europe was very normal to belong to some kind of an organized religion. And in Germany, it's pretty much divided, where the northern part of the country is Protestant, it's Lutheran, who was, of course, a major influence in the German culture, the German history. in developing the Lutheran faith, and then the southern part is usually Catholic. So we were right there in the middle, and my little town is pretty much Catholic, and that's how I grew up. I do have to say that it was extremely progressive, and there was a lot of freedom. I also was an active member of the ministry. I was in the youth groups. We did a lot of traveling with them. I have very, very fond memories of going to Italy and Norway, Sweden, Denmark, different camps that our parents would send us on, and also just having a very active life in the church. We had very good priests that were taking care of us youth, and it was, for me personally, a very positive experience. And also, like I said, a lot of freedom, a lot of discussions. And I actually shared a very interesting story with my meditation group the other day, where I was asked about my upbringing. I'm like, we even had religion as a subject in school till at least our sixth class, and then it went into ethics. So when I am looking at my old school books that my mother has given me, there are some, homework books. My first picture in my religion homework book was me drawing a picture of Adam and Eve, all hidden behind plants to be It's a cute picture. I really love it. And then I went to the next page, and it was the Big Bang. And then it went into the evolution of the earth, the volcanoes, and then how first life sprang up and from the ocean and then crawling on land and all that. I'm like, isn't that amazing that we literally learned evolution in religion, in the subject area of religion? And then later, after sixth grade, I remember very specifically some of the movies that we watched and discussed were The Life of Brian and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and MASH, the movie. So when you really think about it, what those subject areas are, that is incredibly inspiring to have been exposed to that while also going to church, while also studying the Bible and all that. So I believe from a very young age, I had a very broad understanding of religion, because we also had a lot of people from the Islamic faith living in my town, because at that point, immigration became a very big deal. And it's just always been normal to be surrounded by Muslims and by people of other faiths. And then the free churches started coming up. We also have Mormon temples in my area, which I also visited and just wanted to find out about. So I've always had a great, great interest in all different religions, in all different philosophies. And then later, when I started working in China, I got introduced to Buddhism and Zen and Taoism. And that just completely broadened the spectrum for me and brought the science and the spirituality even closer together.
So it sounds like you had a very deep respect for the religious environment you were raised in, and bringing in all of the education, the science, really gave you a well-rounded base or understanding of humanity, based on being introduced to so many different things. And then, so what was your actual spiritual life like? Were you really into the Catholicism that you were raised in, or was there more of a deeper sort of a mystical leaning, or was it more of the religious structure that caught your attention?
The religious structure gave me the social interactions, while I have to say there was also quite a rebel living in me that did not just buy everything as it was taught to me. I loved the stories. I loved the metaphors. I understood them as metaphors, as analogies on how to live a loving and productive life in society, while I also questioned certain aspects that just didn't make any sense to me. And the biggest one that I very, very early on had a problem with is the concept of heaven and hell. And I really questioned the duality of good and evil, and why God would smite people who make mistakes. And that is actually one of the wounds that I did heal later on in my life, where it wasn't okay to make mistakes. That is one of those limiting beliefs that I grew up with, that there was harsh consequences and there was no compassion ultimately when humans made mistakes, when I made mistakes as a child. And that is something that I questioned from a very early age on. And I absolutely remember, because I still go to the same church, which was actually founded in the 9th century. And it was dedicated to a martyr named Gallus. And we're very historical, and we're very proud of our history in Germany, as you can imagine. And so there is a lore, there is a mythology of how that was just a tiny little chapel. It probably was pagan at some point, and then, a sacred ground gets developed over time. It was then turned into a little chapel. They actually got a little tiny bone from Gallus's finger, supposedly. we're huge about relics. And then it developed, and then the church that we currently have, which is a gorgeous church, and it has incredible acoustics, and that has a beautiful organ, gorgeous bells. I mean, it's really beautiful, historically speaking, and architecturally. And it also, and I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it, just that energy. And that's what fascinates me with religion and spirituality in general. Just the imagination of how many millions of prayers have happened in those places. And let's take away, all the bad press and all the interesting things that are happening in all religions and the way it's being taken by humans and what they do with it. When I really go to the very, very basis of why people seek God and why people seek a higher power, I really can feel that when I walk into a sacred place and I feel the energy of all the people having put their sorrow out there, their hopes, their aspirations, and simply asking for help and attempting to communicate with a higher power and to understand life after death and where do we come from, and those really, really big questions that we will never figure out as long as we are here on earth. And just the other day, I heard another story of someone who had gone into a near-death experience, and they were gone for a while, and they talked about the tunnel again and the white light and the rainbows and how beautiful it was. And that is my belief. That is my belief system. And that's also, as I will share about my husband and his journey, what gives me a lot of inspiration and healing when I think about where he's at now and the kind of afterlife that he now gets to enjoy and the oneness that he gets to be part of. So yes, it was a very early discovery for me to find my own path with it. I definitely questioned a lot. I was rebellious towards certain concepts. And then there is also the nature side, because my fondest memories as a little child were being in the forest, being in the vineyards, being in the fields, finding moss and little sticks and mushrooms and building little fairy villages. I've always done that. I'm still doing it. I'm still doing it with my grandkids. And that is something that's always been part of my life, communicating with the metaphysical. I've always had my angels. I've always had my guides. Jesus was a major part of my life from a very early age on, as a guide, as a spirit that I was able to communicate with, who comforted me, who answered my questions, who gave me inspiration, and also just trusting that the energy that I would feel was a rock or a crystal, or hearing the thoughts of an animal, hearing the thoughts of a plant, which is now stuff that's all coming to the forefront, that we're now understanding that trees are communicating with each other, that they have energy, that they have warning system with each other. I mean, there's just so much phenomenal research, and that's why I have that interest in the bridge between spirituality and science, because the stuff that I thought I was crazy for when I was a child are now being proven. And now all of a sudden I get to go back in time and tell my younger self, you were right on. And you were not crazy. You didn't just make this up in your mind when you felt the energy of a plant and you knew that it needed certain nutrients, or that it would grow more when you talked to it and loved it. And I always had the best plants. And my mom still has one tree that I had as a child, which is now 50 years older, and it's a Benjamini, and it's still this wonderful, thriving tree that she has. It's just absolutely fascinating. So
Wow.
that's my summary of my childhood.
Yeah, what a rich, rich childhood. And there's a lot of similarities, growing up in England and growing up in the countryside and having, the Church of England, church and school to some degree, religious studies, but a strong leaning towards science, a strong love of nature and fairies. I just love that you talk about the making little fairy cottages with your grandchildren. That is just beyond sweet and such a blessing to give them. That's really, really lovely. You mentioned your husband and the journey you've been on, and how your spirituality, your inner wisdom has really supported you in your grief journey with him. I'd love to know about why you came to America, when you met your husband, and share a little bit about that, because that's so many of us have deep connections, and when we lose someone so close and so dear, it can be a very big challenge for us.
And that is definitely a very big subject that has been very close to my heart for the last 2 years. And right now we are in the middle of the development between him getting diagnosed and then passing away, which was about a 4-month span. So I'm reliving that time in my life again, in my heart, in my mind, what was going on and how it all went down. So to go back in time, I've always felt a yearning to travel the world. I wanted to go to Egypt as long as I can remember. And actually what I'm looking at right now is a mural that I painted of the Great Pyramids of Egypt. And then I have some spiritual signs around it. So Egypt has always been big in my heart. There has been a drawing. And I now understand as I grow older why it has been such a calling for me. And you bringing up coming from England, I got to go to Stonehenge when I was only 9 years old. And that was pivotal. That was absolutely magical. I have a picture of it right here in front of me on my vision board. And it is such a magical place. I remember being there. And those were the days where you can actually still get very close to them. They weren't roped off yet.
Yes.
And that was just magnificent to me. And it's also where I believe it's providence. It's also kismet that my parents were drawn to take us there at such an early age. And then later I got to go to the pyramids of Egypt. Actually 3 times I've been there, and I've walked through the ancient temples in Luxor and Memphis, and just mind-blowing. And so that has always been in my heart. I had a lot of time with my grandparents as a child because my mother worked part-time, and I would go there after school. And I remember not only was I exposed to music because my grandpa was a very good piano player, and my grandma always had classical music on, and I learned a lot about ballet and opera and operettas and all that. And again, the love for nature. They had a lot of nature books and maps. So I became obsessed with America. I wanted to come to United States. My uncle had been here. And this is actually really funny to see how it all fits together, because my uncle would come home from his journeys and they would get an RV and drive around southern Utah, and then they go up to Yellowstone and Yosemite. They go to LA and San Francisco, Monument Valley. And now I live right there, where they would literally park in the 70s and sleep to then go to one of our national parks here that we're surrounded by. I live only 1 hour north of the Grand Canyon. That was the non plus ultra for European to go to. We love traveling. We have 6 weeks paid vacation. It is normal to take big vacations. And the 70s and 80s were the time where it became very popular to travel to USA and do the big national parks and see some of those big cities. And that's what I grew up with. So that yearning to go to America, and I was begging my parents to send me as an exchange student to America. And then we made a deal. First, you do your graduation, and then after that, you can decide what you want to do. I knew I wasn't study material. I had enough after 13 years of public school. And I just wanted to get into the workforce. I wanted to make money. I wanted to travel, which is exactly the time that I met my husband. During that time, a lot of soldiers were still stationed in the Frankfurt area. It was the biggest airport in Europe at that time. I believe it also was the headquarters at that time. And my husband had come to Germany in 1986 as a helicopter mechanic. And then the soldiers would go out on the weekends to the party district of Frankfurt called Sachsenhausen, which of course we also would go to the party. And at that point, I was in a study program to become a trilingual secretary. I was an actual interpreter and translator for medical texts. And because we wanted to practice our English and not just sit in an office and do the typewritten version of it, we would go to the bar district to meet American soldiers, have fun. I would bring my saxophone and we would all sing songs together. And that's how we ended up meeting each other, fell in love with each other, started dating after a few months. And then I came to America for the first time in 1988. And I got to see Atlanta, Orlando, went to Disney World, where his parents lived at that time. They lived in across Augusta from Georgia. I don't remember. Aiken. It was Aiken, South Carolina. So that was my very first exposure to America, and I just absolutely fell in love with it. So 2 years later, we moved to Utah because that's where his parents had moved for job purposes. And we got married in Las Vegas, actually, on the 4th of March in 1990. And then drove through Zion, Bryce Canyon, up to Salt Lake City, surprised his parents. Here we are, and we just got married. And then, of course, we also did the big church wedding in Germany afterwards, half a year later, for my family. And that was just absolutely wonderful to have both sides and have essentially my marriage sanctified in, 2 continents. And I absolutely love that. And then in 92, we officially moved here, because there was a job offer, they had an apartment for us, and it was just a fantastic adventure. And it was the fulfillment of my dreams that I had made as a little kid.
Oh.
Yeah, so that's the fun part of the story. And we were together for over 37 years. And then it was in 2023 that he got diagnosed with cancer. At that point, what we didn't know, the brain cancer that was found after he had some seizures was already the continuation of lymphoma that he had for probably a couple of years. So that was a very, very fast journey. And it was a huge surprise for everybody, because my husband was the type of person who wanted to live to be 150 years. He was a vegan, he hiked, he fasted a lot. He had a very deep spiritual life. So he was one of those stories where, like, why him? And that's what a lot of people asked me, and him as well, when he was sharing with our family and friends his journey. And he knew instantly that it was terminal. It was just too far ahead already. And the very aggressive chemotherapy that they offered him did not work. And that's when his doctor declared that he only had a few months to live. And yeah, from that moment on, it was 6 weeks until he actually passed away. And he passed away under his terms, very peacefully. And we had closure. And I feel really good about that we were able to talk about everything. We processed our life like every other couple. I like to say it was 95% phenomenal and 5% crap. I think it's a pretty good ratio. And it was just spectacular, because we traveled the world. We did everything we wanted to do. It was a great adventure. It was the greatest adventure of my life. We also waited 12 years until we had children. So by the time in our mid-30s that we actually did embark on that chapter in our life, I feel that we were in a much, much better place than in our mid-20s, and still being much more selfishly oriented, and we want to see the world. So I feel that by that time we really had settled, and we were able to give our children a much more stable upbringing, even so with self-employed parents, lots of traveling and going back and forth between Germany and America, because they have been to Germany pretty much every year of their life for at least a vacation, and then they got to go with us to other places as well. And I'm very happy and grateful for that I was able to offer that to my children, and that we as a couple were able to offer that to our children and give them a very broad perspective about life. Yeah.
Tell me about your children. You have how many?
2 boys.
2 boys.
And now all of a sudden, my one son is going to turn 27 and the other one's going to be 25 this summer. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So you had a few weeks with your husband after the diagnosis, and how was that for your family? That must have been based on the closeness, based on your 95% awesome, 5% crap, I can imagine that the loss or the absence of their father, your husband, must have been enormous.
Sean has some very deep spiritual beliefs about the afterlife, and we both believe in the oneness and that the quantum field that consists everything. So we are never really gone. It's just the physical body that goes away. And he was very clear about his presence in the energetic realm and still being part of this physical life. And I also have a very deep spiritual belief about what happens to us afterwards and where we're going to be, and how that essence of us is always there, is always present. And I actually was thinking about that earlier when I was meditating, when I thought about my soul, because that is one of those discrepancies that I had with the Catholic upbringing, when there is this one prayer about my soul is not healthy, make my soul healthy again. And that was one of those places where I spiritually departed from what I learned by saying, no, I do believe that our soul is healthy. Our soul is that part of the oneness, of that part that is God, that we are a part of, which is our personal little unique facet that we get to express, and yet it is divine. So in my belief system, and I don't know if it's just semantics and if there's some other word for it that other people might be using, in my belief system, when I talk about the soul is healthy, whole, and complete, and is that which is part of God. It's part of the divine, part of the quantum field. And that part is everlasting, and it will always be there.
Can you describe the nature of your relationship with your husband, soul to soul, now?
Exactly. And that's where there is no separation. See, that gives me goosebumps just thinking about it, and it brings tears to my eyes, because on that level, we are never separated. And I'm never separated from any other relatives I've lost over time, or when my parents are ready to move on, or Sean's parents, when they died over 20 years ago, that part never got lost. And that's where also the healing is, because then everything bad that we are processing and the things where we are unforgiving to ourselves, we're unforgiving to other people, or we have a hard time forgiving them, on the soul level, there is no issue whatsoever. And there is complete and utter understanding. And so when I now communicate with my husband on the soul level, which, by the way, he shows up in my dreams all the time. And it's really cool, because we're always on some kind of an adventure, or we're building a house together, or we're having some kind of a party. I literally always have some kind of encouraging and sweet energy dream with him, where then when I wake up, I smile and I go, thank you. Thank you for visiting me. So that is something that really holds me in a very high vibration, even in my grieving, because I understand it's the human me. It's the physical me. It's that tiny, tiny, tiny little aspect of me that chooses to be in this physical reality where you can touch stuff and you can smell, you can see, and all that. That is just a tiny little sliver of what our true experience is. And I really love this whole thing. No, you're not a human having a spiritual experience. You're a spiritual being having a human experience. And when I can stay in that mindset, then there is no missing. There is no grieving, because then I know in the big picture, we are all connected. And we are also connected with people like Jesus and Mother Teresa's and everybody else in the world that are meaningful to us. I'm a huge fan of Hildegard von Bingen, and she lives in me, and I can connect with her soul, and I can connect with her in dream time or in meditation, and I can be with her in her monastery and draw on those incredible resources that this incredible mystic had over 900 years ago. So when I'm able to stay in the soul connection, all is well. There is no separation. Everything is good to go. And that is what I need to remind myself when I go through the harder grief times. For example, Valentine's Day hit me pretty hard this year. My husband was a great romantic. He loved to write me cards. He had gifts, the flowers, the going out to dinner and all that. And I think I was just in shock the first Valentine's after he had passed. And so this year I felt pretty sorry for myself. And at the same time, I was able to be seeing that I was feeling sorry for myself. I'm like, wow, I'm having a rough day today. And I allowed myself to have a rough day. I know this is a feeling right now. This is my human self in a place of grief and missing, wishing he was here and all that. And I know that will pass. And I also will get back to that level where I can feel fully connected with him again. And I think my children have the same kind of relationship where deep down they know they will always be connected with him, and their father will be there and is there as a guide. And being at their age, there is also more of the, wow, why did my father have to leave so early? Why am I a 20-some-year-old person? And it being 2 years, that means Grayson was 24 and Max was 22, which is just too early, and everybody who had lost their parents at a very young age can relate with that there is that part that says, why me? Why did he have to leave so early? Why can't he be here? And then especially when it comes to having special celebrations or seeing the grandkids grow up, that's what I know are their pain points when they are questioning reality and why is it the way it is. Yeah. But I also know they have enough of a deep spiritual understanding that they know in the quantum fields that we will always be connected.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is the perfect time for a very short break. We're going to take a short break and then we'll be back and we'll wrap up our grief conversation and then move a little bit into the work that you do to support people, especially the law of attraction and resilience, because I know those things are just top on your list at the moment. We'll be right back.
Please help us say thank you to all of our organizational sponsors, including the Hefferland Foundation, Affiliated New Thought Network, International New Thought Alliance, Science of Mind Archives and Library Foundation, Center for Spiritual Living Denver, Center for Spiritual Living Midtown, New Thought Philadelphia, Center for Spiritual Living United Life, Sunshine Cathedral, Planned Happiness Institute, Summit Center for Spiritual Living, One Heart Retreats, Universal Joy Center, Unity Kitchener, Unity Spiritual Center, Ottawa, Home Center for Spiritual Living, Satya Center, Begin Within Ministries, Center for Spiritual Living, North Jersey, Unity of Savannah, and the Center for Spiritual Living, Seattle, as well as all of our individual donors. On behalf of New Thought Media Network, thank you, and please like, share, and subscribe. New Thought Media Network, come be you. Come expand your spiritual journey. Join us for Just the Talk, Sundays, 1 p.m. to 6 p.m. Mountain Time. Experience Unity Kitchener and Ottawa. Center for Spiritual Living Midtown, Center for Spiritual Living Denver, Unity of Garden Park, New Thought Philadelphia, the Sunshine Cathedral, Unity of Savannah, and the Om Center for Spiritual Living. Come unleash your spiritual potential with New Thought Media Network.
Free my mind, open my heart with the whispers of truth. To live a conscious life, to live a conscious life on the growing edge. On the growing edge.
And now, here's Ali.
And we're back with Christiane Turner. So I can only imagine the depth of awareness that you and your husband have helped support your children in developing in regards to oneness and the quantum field, and having that awareness and dealing with losing a parent. That must have been a huge support for them, having you and the two of you raising them to have this deeper spiritual awareness and connecting with him, developing a relationship with him in a different form. It sounds like that's a real reality for you and for them, and possibly your grandchildren too. And how about your parents? All four of them, or you said that your husband's passed away years ago and yours are still here. And so does their spirituality or their way of seeing the world and what happens after someone leaves this realm, are you able to have a conversation or support each other in what's happening with someone being gone? Does that all make sense? And
that's the can of worms right there.
yeah.
That's a long conversation right there. The most important thing is to talk about it. And that is
Yes.
something that we immediately agreed on when my husband was diagnosed, to be as open as possible and to share our sorrow, our questions. And when I look at the stages of grief, what I realized in the meantime is it's not a linear journey. You can be in anger one day, then you can be in missing it, then you can be depressed, then you can go back to anger, then you go into the negotiation, and it's just a really weird thing moving forward. And as long as we honor that, and that's something that I am really grateful for, that we encourage that from a very young age on, and also in our relationship, to have that openness to be able to talk about it. And that is something that I'm just so deeply grateful for, that we encourage that in our relationship as partners, and we also encourage that with our children. And that is the seeds that we sowed many, many years ago that I now get to reap the fruits in having my children being so open in coming to me and saying, hey, I'm feeling this, and how do you feel about that? Or would you talk about this, please? And that is just my greatest joy. That is my greatest comfort. That is my greatest love. And also that, for example, the grandkids who are still too young to actually remember their grandfather, they only have glimpses and they say pictures. But then my 6-year-old granddaughter drew a picture of her grandfather the other day, and she put a lot of hearts around him. And then she started crying and says, I miss my Opa. And so that's when I'm going, oh my goodness, that is so healthy for her to be able to express that. And then we cried together. And it's important and it's okay to acknowledge those moments, because then there's also the pictures where they're bouncing around on tree trunks and, they have big smiling pictures in front of flowers. And I'm like, and your Opa loved you so much. and you guys had some really good times with him. And that's what I'm also encouraging with my children, that we always, because we both worked together for a lot of years, we always joked that we were married for 95 years. When you really add up how much time we got to spend with each other, that it was a very, very long relationship, and it was a very long marriage. The same with our children, who we pulled out of school between the 6th and the 7th grade. And then we homeschooled them, and they went to internet school for a while. And again, you guys had 40 years of parents, you know, when you really think about it, in comparison to other children seeing their parents for a couple of hours in the morning, a couple of hours in the evening, and then on the weekends. So in that sense, I really feel that they did get all that input and all that love and playtime and all that stuff that they needed for a healthy growing up. And then you asked me about my parents, which, because of their belief system in a life after death, you know, pearly gates, heaven, and all that fun stuff, that they have their own way of thinking about it. And then my job is just to translate my belief system into words that make sense for them. Because if I start with the whole quantum universe and the quantum mechanics part of it, that's when I lose them. And the law of attraction is another very interesting thing. And I'm just going to jump right into a story.
Yeah, let's go.
My mother was diagnosed with aneurysms 15 years ago, about 15 years ago. And one of them was 6 millimeters, the other one was 4 millimeters. And she was told they can't be shrunk. And as long as they don't grow, she doesn't have to have surgery. And the surgery is very invasive. The aneurysms are in her brain, and you have to go into the hip and then go up into the brain, which is just a crazy, crazy surgery. And my mother didn't want it. She was already in her late 60s and said, nah, I don't want that kind of surgery. Well, as long as they don't grow, I'm okay with that. Well, then, because I like to slide in law of attraction ideas and things about placebo effect, mind-body connection, miraculous healing, all the things that are possible. And I told my mother the story of the research, and that is actually, you can find that online, about doing knee surgery and having a control group where the doctors pretended to do the surgery. Yes, they cut the knee open, did a small incision, sewed them back up, and then told the patient that the surgery went fantastic and that they're going to heal just right. And those people healed just as well as the people who had actual surgery performed. And I absolutely remember, oh my goodness, now we get goosebumps again, because it was at the monastery of Hildegard von Bingen, where she grew up like 30 miles from where I grew up. And I go to that monastery every single time I go to Germany, because it's such a holy place. And I get so inspired by this incredible healer and mystic that she was. And we were at the monastery, and I told my mom that story about the healing that happened purely by placebo effect. And she said, huh? For real? This really happened? And I'm like, oh my goodness, it's just one of many examples. And then, because my mother, I know I got my rebellion from her. I'm like, and knowing that the rebel that you are, you're not just going to let the doctors tell you that you can't shrink those aneurysms. And lo and behold, my mother has to go to an annual checkup. She has shrank the aneurysms. And that is a story she loves to tell people, how she was able to make her aneurysms go smaller. So then she was diagnosed with COVID in, was it 22 or 23? One of the two. And we actually spent many months there. We were supposed to go on a vacation for 6 weeks, and then we were going to go hiking. My mother contracted COVID. It went on her heart. It went into her brain. It really did a big number on her. And we thought we were going to lose her. We had to call the ambulance 5 times. She was in the hospital twice. It was a really horrendous deal. And that's actually when the book Resilience was born in my mind. I was thinking about, what can I give to my community on the level of how can the law of attraction be applied in real life, especially with what we're dealing with right now. And how does this help my mom with what she's going through right now? And that's when I realized resilience is the number one resource. People who have natural, resilient capabilities will weather the storm. So I started researching resilience and I started taking notes, and all of a sudden I'm realizing, oh my goodness, there's a book here. Now, what I didn't know, that a year later, I would need that information for myself. And that is, I would say, one of the greatest resources that I was able to tap into when I looked at all the different qualities of resilience. To have a big picture attitude, to know that things are going to turn out okay, to be able to accept support. That was the number one reason I went into that very specific arena, because resilience has been covered. There are many wonderful books written about resilience. And what I realized is that a person who's deeply resilient is not afraid to ask for support. And that is another one of those woundednesses, one of those wounds I have from my childhood, that I believed that I had to be Superwoman. I wore my cape with pride. I can do this by myself. I don't need any help. Look at me, totally egotistical about, look at me, how I'm handling everything by myself. I don't have to ask for help. And what I realized during my research, and also in having to ask for help and seeing my mother having to ask for help, because we were several caretakers, including my father, my husband, and myself, as well as my sister and her family, that it took a village to help us make it through that half year, that it took my mother to recover at least to a point where she was somewhat functioning again. And you know what? She had a miraculous recovery. She is now 82 years old. And she is able to live a fulfilled life again, where she's able to run her household, of course, with the help of my father. And it's just spectacular. And it is a miraculous healing that this woman went through. So she is very open when I talk about the law of attraction. And I will make little jokes when we play cards, and she complains that she keeps getting bad cards. I'm like, my mom, it's because of the energy sending out. You need to believe that you draw good cards. And then she gets good cards. She's like, oh, I'm using the law of attraction. So it's really, really cute how I can really translate it into a mode that works for her. And it's very humorous, it's very lighthearted, and we laugh about it a lot. With my father, he's the organized accountant. It's a little bit of a different story. He's all about structure. And he is also the very devout Catholic who simply does it his way. And so I have less conversations with him about those subjects. But then I can talk about prayer. And I go to church with him. And we love church music. And then we sing together. So I have a very different connection with each one of them, in a very unique way that just works for each one of them. And I get my fix, because then my father is that very structured spiritual approach, and my mom is a little bit more rebellious, lighthearted. We're playing cards together and having a good time talking about philosophy. So more philosophical and then more spiritual. So it's interesting. And it took me a long time, trust me, because when I first got into neurolinguistic programming and into the law of attraction, I did not know how to communicate that without sounding really strange and challenging their belief system.
Wow. So your book on resilience and learning to accept support, that you thought you were writing to support your community and whomever else, was really a gift for you during the devastating loss of your husband.
Exactly.
And so you've written this, and it's been a while, a year or so, I think. Can you leave us with some insights that you have found most important here for individuals that maybe like you and me think that we can do it all by ourselves? Tell us more about how to use this art of accepting support, and how that will expand our capacity for resilience, whether that's with our relationships or in our workplace or just in our everyday lives. And how can people, what should they do in order to put this more into practice in their own lives?
That's an excellent question. Thank you, Ali. First of all, I realized I wasn't alone. It is a sign of our times. It's a sign of our generation, Generation X, grew up as the first latchkey kids. We were the survivors. We were the ones who were driving around without the car seats. We were gone all day. Our parents didn't know where we were. There's some really fun research online about our generation and how we differentiate from the baby boomers and the millennials. And so it was kind of a normal thing to wear that cape of self-sufficiency, and especially as a female entrepreneur, because that was a sign of like being very self-sufficient and really having to do it by myself, wearing many hats, the entrepreneur miss and all that fun stuff. So that is something that I realized is actually a collective thing that a lot of women share, and men as well, that we just have to do it by ourselves. And then as I found out all those qualities about what does it mean to be a deeply resilient person, reaching out, sharing, being open, asking for help, being vulnerable became things that I kept running across. And I saw that that was my piece that I could offer. So where it really starts is support from within. And now this goes into the advice giving mode. And what our listeners can take from this is, first of all, we need to support ourselves from within, being kind, forgiving, and passionate to ourselves. Stop being so hard on ourselves. Stop beating ourselves up. Stop not being able to make mistakes and recovering from them. Stop that perfectionism that we have created around how we should be showing up in life. And by the way, I do believe in perfectionism. And perfectionism is to accept our imperfection. And everything just is what it is. And that is what makes it perfect. So since I started putting those frameworks around perfectionism and self-sustainability and all that, my life has gotten so much easier, and I'm so much more compassionate and kind to myself. So that's the first level, to simply be kind to ourselves, be forgiving and understanding, and accepting ourselves exactly the way we are. Then the second level, and that's where I think most of us can do a lot of growing, is to be vulnerable to our outside world and to be able to share where we're at and then ask for help. I don't have to organize the party all by myself. I don't have to organize the event all by myself. And then when people ask me, how can I help you? Oh, I got this covered. That used to be my standard response. Now I take a moment and think, I know what you love to do. I know what you're really good at. Is this something that would work for you where you can support me? And that has been huge. And now I'm able to accomplish so much more. I'm able to create bigger events and make bigger things happen because I'm allowing myself to accept the support, and then don't have to stress out so much and have all this activity before, during, and after, and not able to enjoy myself because I'm so busy handling all the logistics. So that was a huge step, to be able to simply allow help. So not only the being able to ask someone else, hey, I have this gig going on, can I ask you to support me in this? And also when the offer comes, when the help is being offered, to not immediately go into the default of, no, sorry, no, thank you, I got this handled, into, let me think about this for a moment. And how would this be a great match? Because of course I want it to be also nourishing for the person who's helping, which is actually a big subject, because when we deny help, we're actually denying the gift that the other person's giving us. They're thinking something, they're feeling something when they're offering the help. And so to say, no, I got this covered, we're actually doing them a disservice. So that's the second level. And then the third level is our higher power, our connection with the divine, the quantum field, God, the universe, and to simply be loved, to feel at one, to know that somehow it all makes sense in the big picture. There is something so big that we can't understand. And I did have that conversation with a Zen master in Shanghai many years ago when there were terrorist attacks in France at that time. And I asked him how he, as a Zen master, processes that. And he said, I don't have an opinion about it because I don't understand the big picture. That is the Zen way of looking at it. And I went, wow. And I've been pondering that ever since. And whenever something big happens, my first response now is, I don't understand the bigger picture. I don't understand the historical implications of what that means when we're looking back 500 years from now. And I'm saying, oh, that's what it was about. This is part of our human evolution. And that's this very specific piece that it added to that. And that has given me a lot of peace of mind when I think about it. The other thing is, my favorite quote from Albert Einstein is that the most important question we need to ask ourselves is, do I live in a friendly universe? Which translated into religion, I'm paraphrasing it my way, is, do I live with a loving God? Do I believe in a loving, compassionate, forgiving, and understanding God? Or do I believe in a smiting, wrathful, you can't make mistakes kind of God who will punish me with heaven and hell, things like that. Yeah. And so that is the 3 levels that I have put as a framework around that concept of resilience: support from self, allowing support from others, and living in the kind of universe where we are naturally supported. And there is nothing that has to be earned, nothing that we have to deserve, because just by being here, we are already deserving of that love, of that belongingness, and being part of that oneness.
That's beautiful, Christiane. Really, truly. So how can people connect with you? How can they reach? We've got 1 minute left.
Okay. In my self-care and the maintenance of my own mental health, I have stepped away from most social media, and I'm only maintaining my Facebook at this point. And I have a YouTube channel, so people can find me on YouTube. And there you will see my videos either under Quantum NLP or my name, Christiane Turner. And I do upload quite regularly, and I'm actually going to upload more meditations nowadays. You can find all of my books on Amazon, and as far as I know, also on Audible. And yes, I'm working on getting e-versions as well. My current project is Think Big and Be Cool with What Shows Up. And that is going to be a book about non-attachment. And then, yeah, find me on Facebook. Please send me a personal message, because I have way too many friend requests sitting in my inbox, and I can't accept any more friend requests. So please like my page, Christiane Turner Author, or just send me a personal message and introduce yourself, and then let me know that you would like to be my friend, and we can figure that out. And I have several groups on my Facebook wall as well. And my favorite is the Law of Attraction Bootcamp, where I do most of my personal sharing, most of my teaching, and that is a growing group that I really cherish. And I have a lot of personal contact with my students and clients on that group. And you can, of course, also schedule a personal coaching session with me. And if you want to invite me to speak at your spiritual center or anywhere else, I would love to have a conversation with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Christiane. It's been such a pleasure having you. And thank you for everyone watching today. I know that you've received blessings from today's conversation from Christiane's heart and mind. And thank you to New Thought Media Network, our production team, Michael, my producer. And thank you to the Satya Center for sponsoring this episode and every episode. And if you would like to support our ministry, you can do so at either the icon on the screen, or you can go to our website, growingedgelive.com. I love you. I will see you next week. Peace and blessings to you. And thank you for being here. Bye-bye.
Free my mind, open my heart with the whispers of truth. To live a conscious life, to live a conscious life on the growing edge.